Hello, these are flip notes 4b.1 in our unit on social psychology, and in this section we're talking about attribution theories and person perception. Let's get started. So, what is social psychology? It's a scientific study of how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. So, psychology in general is the study of individual behavior, but with social psychology, we're studying our behavior in the context of being within a group. Sociology is the study of the actual group behavior. So we're looking at individuals and how they're influenced by the group. We'll first look at attribution theories. So with attribution, we're wondering, how do we attribute or explain our behaviors? Is it more dispositional, which is our own internal feelings, or more situational? So again, attribution theory is how we explain the causes of people's behavior, including our own. So when we say situational, we're talking about external or environmental factors, like there was traffic, or the weather slowed me down from getting here on time. The person's internal disposition would have to do with their personality or internal factors, like I'm lazy and I just don't ever want to get out of bed on time, and maybe that's why I'm late. So another example, let's say you're going to make a 5 on your AP Psych exam, 5 being the best. Situational attribution would be external. You'd say, well, the reason I made a 5 is because Miss Thomas is amazing and she prepared me so well. Whereas a dispositional attribution, it's internal. You say, I'm so smart and I studied so hard to get this 5. So you take all the credit yourself. In reality, we generally use both. Our explanatory style can be described as being optimistic or pessimistic, terms you probably know, but optimistic usually takes a lighter, more positive point of view, and pessimistic turns to face the negative or downside of things. All of these can contribute to some errors and biases, and each of these we'll describe a little bit more on the next slides. The fundamental attribution error refers to how we judge others. The actor-observer bias has to do with others versus ourself, and then the self-serving bias is also judging ourself. So with the fundamental attribution error, we tend to over-attribute the behavior of other people to their internal dispositional factors and disregard their external factors. So let's say when somebody else is late, you say, well, they're just late because they're lazy. You tend not to consider, well, there was a train and that slowed them down. When you're late, you tend to make it more external. I'm late, the government needs to do something about all this traffic. So fundamental error is when we're attributing other people's behaviors to their dispositional factors and not considering the situational factors. The actor-observer bias has to do with yourself, that when you are as in the actor or you're observing a situation. So if a person cuts someone off in traffic, they might justify it by needing to get to an important appointment. But if someone else cuts them off, they might think the other driver is reckless, dispositional. The self-serving bias also applies to yourself. You attribute your success to internal factors, your disposition, and failures to external factors, situational. So if you got an A on the test, it's due to how awesome you are. But if you were to get an F on the test, you're going to blame your teacher. So going back to the slide real quick, again, fundamental attribution error, that's when we're judging others. So, and then actor-observer bias, others versus yourself, and self-serving bias is just yourself. Locus of control was in our previous unit, but we bring it up here again. When you have an internal locus of control, you believe that it is your personal decisions, efforts, and abilities and hard work that explain your behavior. External, again, it's fate, it's the government, it's luck, it's other circumstances, but it's not your control. This terms will pop up again when we get to mental health. People who have more of an external disposition tend to be more prone to depression because they tend to feel that they cannot control their situations. Next social situation is the mere exposure effect, which says that the more you're exposed to something, the stimulus increases the likelihood of your positive evaluation, which basically means the more you see something or exposed to something, you tend to like it more over time. So this is really how advertising works. Why do they pay to play the same commercial over and over again? Because the more you see that product, the more you're likely to like it. This might happen with fashion trends, that at first you might think a fashion trend is dumb, but then the more times you see it, you start to like it more and more and more. A self-fulfilling prophecy is where your expectations leads to some kind of change in your behavior, causing the expectation to be fulfilled. So, for example, if a teacher expects that her student is going to fail, then maybe subconsciously she spends less time with that student. She spends more time noticing their flaws instead of spending time helping them, and then she can help contribute to their failing. Whereas if a teacher has positive expectations with a student, then they're going to unconsciously or subconsciously maybe spend more time checking in on them, being more positive to them, and those behaviors can help lead the student to be more successful. So the teacher may have contributed to that self-fulfilling prophecy. The social comparison theory is our tendency to want to compare ourselves to others. The belief that we're driven to gain accurate self-evaluations, and we gain accurate self-evaluations by comparing ourselves to others. This was based off Leon Festinger, who also did cognitive dissonance. But this also tends to lead us to have people who we both look down on. So our downward comparisons, people who we think are lower or worse off than us. And then we also have people who we tend to compare ourselves upwardly, who we think are better off than us. But social comparisons can also lead to relative deprivation. So relative deprivation is the feeling that you're worse off compared to other people. And that can lead to discontent, depression. You resent others because you think that they have more opportunities, better resources. At a grander or bigger social context, people who are in marginalized communities, within groups who are not treated equally with others, this relative deprivation can grow. That they perceive that they lack the same socioeconomic opportunities and privileges, and that can lead to more discontent, which can lead to social movements, protests, and people trying to change systematic inequalities. All right, that's it on our social attribution section.